The rain came down in silver cords that stitched the night to the street, sewing light into puddles and tearing it away again in gusts. Inside the brass and marble lobby of the Crest Meridian, the city's richest hotel turned itself into a theater. Wet umbrellas flared like dark flowers, heels clicked, bellhops moved in synchronized lines. The chandelier overhead hung like a slow explosion of glass. It was nearly midnight. Lila Perez stood behind the marble host stand with a dishcloth looped at her hip, damp hair twisted into a knot that had once been neat. She could feel the rain in her bones even though she wasn't outside, its pressure, its hush pushing against the doors. A busboy dropped a tray of water tumblers somewhere behind her. They shattered like a constellation, and she caught herself closing her eyes. Not from the sound, from the ache. 11 hours on her feet. One more to go. Table 27's asking for lemon again, called Miriam from the kitchen door, executive chef, queen of the back of house, hair tucked under a black bandana. And Lila, breathe. Your shoulders are up around your ears. Lila forced them down, like lowering a pair of heavy suitcases. I'm good, she lied and smiled. She always smiled. The hotel demanded grace like it demanded glossy floors, constant, invisible labor. A gust of wind shoved the revolving door. A man stumbled through, a blur of wet and wealth, jacket dark with rain, tie half undone, hair plastered to his forehead. He paused on the rug like someone who had stepped off a moving train and hadn't realized the ground was solid. The doorman reached for him. The man jerked away, too quick and then too slow, his voice a soft scrape. I'm fine, he said, to no one, to everyone. He wasn't. Lila could see it from 20 feet. The glassiness in his eyes. The careful way he held his body like it had turned into a room with fragile furniture he could break if he leaned wrong. She stepped out from behind the stand without thinking, her hands empty and her posture neutral. The way she'd learned to approach guests who were teetering on some edge only they could see. Good evening, she said, steady, warm. Welcome to the Crest Meridian. His mouth made a half smile, then forgot how. Up close, she recognized him because everyone did, even when they pretended not to. Jonah Crest, son of Victoria Crest, heir to the Crest hospitality empire that had wrapped itself around the city like a silk glove decades ago and never let go. He was 34, the tabloids said. He was brilliant and bored and too rich to be believed, the tabloids said. He collected watches, cars, and half-finished degrees, the tabloids said. Right now, he was just a man on the verge of falling. I need the elevator, Jonah murmured, glancing past her toward the bank of polished doors. Penthouse. Key. I don't... He patted his pockets. His left hand trembled, then clenched it into a fist to make the tremor stop. No problem, Lila said. Let me help. He was a head taller than her, warm with the heat of too much whiskey. She caught the scent of it under the sharper smell of rain, and under that something human and old. Fear. She'd smelled it in hospital waiting rooms, in the grocery line when a debit card got declined, in her own apartment at 3 a.m. when her father's cough turned into silence and she'd had to figure out how to live with both. She stepped closer, and Jonah's gaze snapped to hers like he hadn't expected anyone to be steady. Luggage? She asked. He shook his head. Just me. Then it's you and me, she said softly. Come on, the first step he took was wrong. His ankle slid on the wet marble. Instinct moved faster than caution. Lila reached out and took his forearm in both hands, feeling the fine, soaked wool of his jacket, the surprising thinness of the limb beneath it. He went still. For a second, their reflections met in the dark shine of the floor. Her in a black blouse and apron, eyes that had learned patience from long nights. Him in a suit that cost more than her rent, eyes that couldn't land. You're okay, she said. We'll go slow, he nodded. The doorman hovered, but Lila shook her head. I've got him. She couldn't have explained the certainty that gathered in her chest like a handful of warm stones. It was an old thing, older than this hotel, older than wealth. It was simply this: someone was falling. She could catch. They made it to the elevator in a slow duet of steps. The doors slid open with a hushed sigh. Inside, the mirror showed them a different angle of the same moment. Lila pressed P for penthouse. Jonah slumped against the rail, closed his eyes, and then opened them with effort, as if he'd remembered something he was responsible for carrying. "Don't call her," he said, sudden, sharp. "If I don't pick up. Don't call my mother." Lila blinked. "I won't call anyone you don't want me to." His mouth twitched. "You'll have to see. I forgot the key." He fumbled his hand into his breast pocket and came up with a black card holder. Inside, along with a handful of gold-embossed business cards, there was a slim, white envelope that had been folded and refolded until its corners were soft. It fell, light as breath, and slid under the elevator handrail. Lila reached for it without thinking and then stopped, her fingers inches away. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. Lila picked it up and set it back on the tiny mirrored shelf below the buttons. The envelope had no seal, but a word had been pressed into one corner, once hard, once careless. It read, "Resignation." The elevator eased to a stop. For an impossible second, the hallway outside was perfectly quiet, the air still as a held thought. Then Jonah's phone vibrated in his pocket like a trapped insect. He made no move to take it out. Lila did not look at the envelope again. The hallway carpet was so thick it seemed designed to erase footsteps from memory. Paintings the size of doors watched them pass. Seascapes with sugar-white waves and skies the tender blue of expensive china. At the end, the penthouse doors loomed. Jonah reached for the handle and came up empty. "Key," he said blankly. "Let me check with security," Lila said. "We can verify your identity and get you in." His jaw tightened. "No security? Not tonight." She understood without understanding. Shame sometimes felt like a fire alarm pulled in the middle of a crowded room. He didn't want guards and radios and names. He wanted to be just a person at the threshold of his own home. "All right," she said, and didn't move, because there was nowhere to go. She listened the way you listen for a faint sound in a loud place, and underneath the thunder moving across the stone of the city, she heard it. A whir, a click, the small machine heartbeat of the door's electronic lock cycling every 30 seconds for maintenance. Chef Mariam had once called it the hotel's breath. "Your card holder," Lila said, her voice a thread. "May I see it?" He handed it over like he was giving her a life he barely wanted. Inside, behind the business cards engraved in a font that looked like an expensive secret, there was a paper-thin keycard virtually identical to every other, except for a tiny nick at the corner. It might as well have been a crack in the moon. To anyone else, it meant nothing. To Lila, who had stood at this door twice when the penthouse got fresh flowers, who had watched property services swap out cards and codes on Wednesdays, it meant one thing. This card belonged to the housekeeping master set. You could get into anywhere with it, if you knew what you were doing. She tapped it lightly against the lock panel in the rhythm the technicians use to reset glitches. 2 quick, 1 slow, hold. The light went from red to amber to green. The door unlatched with a low cluck, then swung inward with the reluctant dignity of something that had been trained not to move unless asked very nicely. Jonah exhaled like a diver breaking the surface. "You're a magician," he said. "Only on Wednesdays," Lila answered, and then immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. He laughed. It was small and a little cracked, but it was there, like light finding a way through shutters. The penthouse was a kind of silence that had forgotten about people. Glass walls turned the storm into art. Lamps glowed at a distance. Lila guided him past a grand piano that wore its dust like a fur coat, into the bedroom where the bed was a clean, impossible plateau of white. Everything smelled like linen and lemons. None of it smelled like home. Jonah sat on the edge of the mattress and folded in half, elbows on knees, head in hands. His breath came too fast and then too slow. Lila crouched to his level the way you do for a frightened child or a cornered dog. She kept her hands where he could see them. "Can I get you water?" she asked. He nodded without lifting his head. She went to the kitchen, the soles of her shoes whispering over wood. In the refrigerator, everything was perfect and wrong. 6 identical glass bottles of still water, 3 of sparkling, a bowl of white peaches like a Renaissance still life, A Tupperware the size of an atlas filled with cut fruit that someone had prepared and no one had touched. She took water, a small towel, and, on a human impulse she could not explain, the Tupperware. When she returned, Jonah hadn't moved. "Here," Lila said. She pressed the cool bottle into his hands. He took it, and his hand trembled again, a tremor that looked like a private weather system. He drank, winced, drank again. "Do you need—" She didn't finish because she didn't know the word. "Help? Company? Permission to come apart?" She held out the towel instead. He pressed it to his face and held it there, covering his eyes as if the dark behind the towel were kinder than the dark beyond the windows. When he finally lowered it, the skin around his eyes was blotched like he'd been crying for a very long time and had forgotten to stop. "Thank you," he said, and the words were steady. "What's your name?" "Lila." He looked like he was memorizing it. "Lila," he said. "I won't. I'm not going to die tonight." A sideways smile. "That's not my plan." "I appreciate the heads up," she said. "Do you need me to stay a while? Or would you like me to go?" "Stay," he said too quickly. Then softer. "If you can." "I can," she said. She pulled a chair close, but not too close. The storm did its work on the glass. The city breathed below them. Time got strange, as it does when you are keeping someone company in a room where pain has checked in and will not leave its credit card at the desk. "Everyone wants something," Jonah said after a while. He had not asked for fruit, but he'd eaten a slice of peach without noticing it, juice caught in the corner of his mouth. That's not an accusation. It's just true. It's like gravity. Everyone is falling toward the thing they think will save them. "And what's yours?" Lila asked. She didn't know why she asked. It felt like tossing a rope into the dark to see if it found a hand. He stared at the peach pit in his palm as if it were a small, alien skull. "Rest," he said. "A way to stop running without being caught." "And you?" he asked. "What do you want?" She thought of rent due on the 15th, of the black and white photograph on her dresser of her father in his janitor's coveralls laughing with his eyes closed, of the ache in her feet that felt like a story told in a language only bones understand. She thought of the way Chef Merriam slid staff meals onto the counter with a wink when tips were thin. She thought of the small envelope she kept in the back of a drawer marked "Emergency," with $37 inside and the knowledge that some emergencies are bigger than money. "Safety," she said. It startled her that the word came so fast. Enough to not be afraid all the time. He looked at her like she'd said a word he'd been trying to remember since childhood. "I could give you money," Jonah said, cautious, not a proposition but a hypothesis. "But that doesn't buy safety. It buys walls. Safety is—" "What?" "A promise someone could break." "Maybe," she said. "Maybe it's not a promise. Maybe it's a practice. A set of small daily things that add up." He nodded, closed his eyes, opened them again. The towel lay like a white flag on his knee. "Don't call my mother," he said again, almost tender. "If I fall asleep." "Don't call her." "I won't," she said. He slept. She stayed. She set an alarm on her phone for every 20 minutes, woke him gently, watched him surface, let him sink again. At 2, she found an inhaler in the bathroom cabinet and placed it on the nightstand. At 3, she covered him with the lightest blanket she could find. At 4, the storm moved off and took the sense of immediate crisis with it, leaving the room oddly weightless, like a boat when the waves ease. At 5, she wrote a note on a pad by the phone. "You made it to 5 a.m., drink water. Eat something. Call someone you trust, but only if you want to." Lila, she didn't leave her number. It seemed like an intrusion. She didn't take anything from the room but her damp dishcloth, which she realized she had somehow been holding all night like a talisman. She left the penthouse with the soft click of a door that had learned to keep secrets. The hallway was empty. The elevator mirrored her back to herself. In the lobby, the night had thinned from black to blue. The doorman nodded. Chef Merriam lifted a hand from the kitchen like a blessing. Lila clocked out, then walked home through a city that smelled like wet concrete and bakery steam. She slept for 3 hours and woke to a buzzing phone. It wasn't the hotel. It was the internet. There was a video clip playing and a dozen texts from co-workers, cousins, that one friend who always sent bad news with an apology. It had been filmed from the mezzanine above the lobby, angled just right to catch the moment Lila took Jonah's arm, the way his head tipped toward her shoulder. Someone had slowed it down and set it to a syrupy song. The caption made bile rise in her throat. Waitress bags Billionaire at crest. Watch her make her move. Her heart knocked once against her ribs like it wanted out. She put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, which had needed paint since the spring. When she picked it up again, there were 2 messages from the hotel. Please come in at noon for a conversation and please respond to confirm receipt. She showered in silence, dressed in her plainest black, pulled her hair into a low braid like she was going to war and wanted no loose ends. On the walk to the hotel, the city felt like it knew something. She kept her eyes on her feet, then forced her gaze up because her father had once told her you can't see the world's kindness if you only look at the ground. In Human Resources, a woman named Trina, who wore her compassion like a tight dress she couldn't breathe in, read from a script. A complaint has been filed, Trina said. It alleges that you engaged in inappropriate contact with a guest and used your access to enter a guest room without permission. I helped Mr. Crest reach his suite, Lila said evenly. She had practiced in her head on the walk. What happened, not what I feel. He was intoxicated. He requested assistance. He could not locate his key, but I used a housekeeping MasterCard to let him in. He asked me to stay. I stayed to ensure his safety. Trina nodded as if she were counting. There is no authorization recorded for the use of the MasterCard in the penthouse last night. Authorization is manual on overnight shift, Lila said. We log it in the binder and enter it in the system at 6. The system shows no entry, Trina said, looking pained. And there is no binder entry either. Lila felt something cold and electric move through her body. A suspicion. A knowing. Security cameras. She asked. They'll show me escorting him to the elevator. They'll show him refusing security. Trina's glossed mouth tightened. There was an outage, apparently, on the lobby camera between 11:04 and 11:21 p.m. She pushed a paper across the desk as if it were a piece of furniture she wanted to be rid of. In light of the viral video, the hotel must act swiftly to protect its reputation. The paper said, suspension pending investigation in a font that had never been used to write a love letter. Lila read it all the way through even though she had already absorbed its meaning through her skin. You're suspending me, she said. With pay, Trina added, as if she were offering a hors d'oeuvre. Lila nodded like someone had explained a rule of a game she couldn't afford to stop playing. May I speak to Chef Mariam? She asked. She's in service, Trina said. I'll let her know. On her way out, Lila passed a brass plaque mounted at eye level. She had passed it 100 times and never read it. Today, the words reached out and touched her sleeve. Our guests are our purpose. Our staff are our foundation. She snorted softly, then felt immediately, irrationally guilty, as if the plaque were part of someone's faith. Outside, the sky had washed itself clean. She stood for a minute with the paper in her hand, not looking at her phone, not looking anywhere, until the world resolved into a series of small possible actions. Coffee. Call her cousin. Walk. Don't cry. She did the second thing, then the first. The call went to voicemail. Hey, she said, bright as a penny you keep for luck. It's me, all good. Minor mess at work. I'll explain later. 2 days passed. The hotel said nothing. The internet kept doing what it does, which is devour and replace, devour and replace. New scandals rose like bread dough. Old ones collapsed. By the 3rd day, the clip had been knocked off the top of the algorithm by a celebrity divorce and a dog who could say, banana. Lila breathed a little. She sent Chef Mariam a message that said, I'm sorry for the chaos. The reply came back in 1 minute. You did the right thing. Don't let anyone make you feel small. On the 4th day, a letter arrived by courier, expensive paper that had the faint, cold smell of a store where nothing has a price tag. The outside bore her name in a hand that made every letter look like a staircase. Ms. Lila Perez. Inside, The letter was 3 sentences long. Miss Perez, the Board of Crest Hospitality requests your presence at 10 a.m. on Friday regarding a matter of urgent and private significance. Please present ID at the 47th floor conference room. V. Crest Lila read it twice, then held it up to the light as if it might reveal its real message written in lemon juice. Urgent. Private. V. Crest. Victoria. Crest. The woman who had built an empire out of 5 hotels and a talent for making the wealthy feel like gravity did not apply to them. The woman who had never met Lila and likely never would have, except for a night when a storm broke, a man fell, and a waitress caught him. She didn't sleep much on Thursday. She ironed her only white blouse twice. She wrote her father's name on a slip of paper and put it in her pocket like a blessing you can't buy. On Friday, the elevator to the 47th floor opened on silence that had been designed rather than discovered. The hallway carpet was so pale it could have been mistaken for snow. An assistant with hair that reflected the light like a blade met her at the elevator and took her down a short corridor into a room that belonged to the kind of movies, where rich people decide the rest of the world's fate before lunch. Around the table, 8 people. Lila recognized 4 from magazines. Victoria Crest at the head, silver hair like polished steel, suit the color of first frost, did not stand. To her right, a man in his 50s with the tidy dignity of an expensive pen clipped in the pocket of his suit. Caldwell Pierce, the CFO, 2 women in jewel-toned dresses you couldn't buy without calling a number first. A man in a sweater that cost more than a car and looked like comfort. 2 others in suits like armor. Jonah sat at the far end, sober as a vow. For a moment, everything in Lila went quiet, like a theater when the lights go out. Miss Perez, Victoria said. Her voice was lower than Lila expected. Not sweet, but not cruel either. A tool built for cutting through fog. Please sit, Lila sat. The chair was somehow both too soft and too hard. Her hands found each other in her lap, fingers folded like small, obedient animals. You were with my son the other night, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Lila said. He was unwell. Drunk, said Caldwell Pierce, in a tone that suggested the word itself might stain the carpet. Unwell, Lila repeated, without looking at him. Victoria's mouth twitched, the ghost of amusement or approval. It vanished. There was an incident online. The hotel acted. Clumsily, it appears. I was suspended, Lila said, careful. Pending investigation. Yes, Victoria said. About that. You will be reinstated. Caldwell made a small noise like a hinge that hadn't been oiled. Mrs. Crest, Victoria lifted a hand. The room obeyed. My son, she said, and then paused. For the first time, the edges of her voice softened. Jonah has proposed something unusual. I am not in the habit of indulging unusual, but I am also not in the habit of ignoring what is real. Her gaze sharpened. You stayed. You did not call tabloids. You did not steal. You did not leave him to the wolves of his own mind. Lila felt heat in her face and somewhere under her collarbone, a slow blaze. I did what anyone decent would do, she said. Caldwell made the hinge noise again, louder. With respect, he said, and he did not sound respectful. Ms. Perez used a MasterCard to enter a private residence. There is no record. Because you erased the binder, said Jonah, his voice even, almost bored. It cut through the room like a plane path. Caldwell flinched as if someone had opened a window on a cold day. I didn't, Caldwell began. Security called me the next morning, Jonah continued, unhurried. They said the lobby camera had an outage at 11:04. They said the binder had been mislaid. They said a lot of things that sounded like someone trying to make a line out of a tangle. So I watched the mezzanine footage. He turned his head slightly. Nice angle. Lila's heart did the knocking thing again. She couldn't tell if she was relieved or frightened that he knew the angle from which her care had been turned into scandal. Jonah went on. Then I called maintenance. Do you know what they told me, Caldwell? That you ordered a firmware update on 3 cameras at 10:57. that you asked the overnight supervisor to bring you the binder to review night protocols at 10:50, that the binder wasn't returned until 6:30, that the page for 11 p.m. was missing. Caldwell's face arranged itself into concern, then offense, then something that could have been sadness if it weren't so precise. "This is absurd," he said. "I was at home." "Your badge swiped in at 10:46, Jonah said. "Security logs are wonderful, when no one thinks to ask them to lie." Silence spilled over the table and pooled into the corners of the room. Victoria tapped one elegant finger against the polished surface. "Enough," she said, with a gentleness that was more terrifying than a shout. "Mr. Pierce, I will speak with you after this meeting." Caldwell's jaw tightened so subtly it might have been nothing. "Of course," he said. The words were handcuffs that didn't show. Victoria turned back to Lila. "My son believes we need to do something that honors what you did. He is right." She glanced to Jonah. "Tell her." Jonah sat up a fraction, as if whatever he had to say required more spine. He looked directly at Lila for the first time since she'd entered the room. It was like standing close to a flame that had learned manners. "I'm transferring ownership of the Crest Meridian to a trust," he said. The words were plain, heavy, absurd. Lila felt the floor adjust under her feet like an elevator she hadn't realized was moving. "The trust's purpose will be to run this hotel according to a set of principles that have very little to do with how hotels are usually run, and everything to do with the question you answered the other night: what makes people safe?" He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward her. It was light, and she hated that she had expected it to be heavy, as if that would make it more real. She did not touch it. "The trust," Jonah continued, "will have a board of 3. 1 seat for a representative chosen by the Crest Board to ensure the hotel remains profitable. Don't worry, Mother, you win there. 1 seat for a community liaison chosen by the staff. And the 3rd seat, this is the part where my lawyer wants me to pause for dramatic effect." He almost smiled. "The 3rd seat belongs to you, Lila. You will serve as trustee and general manager. You will have day-to-day control." The room did something strange to her hearing, like someone had put their hands over her ears and then taken them away. She heard the rain. There was no rain. She heard the city. No, that was a noise in her own body. She heard the one thing she had wanted to not hear, the voice in her head that said, "This is not for you. This is a trick. This is a test you will fail, and then they will call you foolish for trying." "I'm a waitress," she said, and her voice sounded calm to her own ears, which felt like luck. "I don't know how to run a hotel." "You know how to run a room," Chef Miriam had told her once. "A room is a hotel in miniature." Lila thought of that now and held on to it like a railing. "You'll learn," Jonah said. "We'll help you. And I don't mean we the way rich people usually do, which means I'll send you a PDF that destroys your will to live. I mean real mentorship, course correction, authority you can actually use." Caldwell laughed suddenly, a sound like ice breaking. "This is madness," he said. "Do you understand our lenders will—" "Caldwell," Victoria said, and his name, spoken like that, turned into a small, obedient thing that came and sat where she pointed. Lila looked at the folder. She looked at Jonah. She thought of safety as a practice. She thought of her father, who had taught her how to read the grain of wood in the temper of a crowd. She thought of the clip online, which had turned her care into a joke and given strangers permission to point. She thought of the plaque in the lobby. "Our guests are our purpose. Our staff are our foundation," and felt a fierce, ridiculous urge to make it true, if only to spite the person who had hung it and stopped there. "What's the catch?" she asked, and she was proud of herself for asking. "You'll be watched," Jonah said simply. "Everyone is, but you'll be more watched. People will try to make you a symbol. It's a trap, being made into a symbol. You'll have to stay human. There are also the legalities. The trust is structured to be hard to break, but not impossible. If you fail spectacularly, my mother can argue you violated fiduciary duty and take back control. You will also be poorly paid for the first year, by the standards of people who own things. By any other standard, you'll be fine." "Define fine," Lila said, and surprised herself into a small smile. 200,000, Jonah said. Plus a 2% equity stake in the hotel's profits deferred for 3 years. It's designed to make you stubborn. Lila's throat went tight. She could see, in a quick, blazing montage, things that money like that could do. Pay every bill until the word bill lost its sour taste. Take breathing lessons from a yoga teacher who didn't make her laugh. Buy her little apartment a new window that didn't rattle when buses passed. Send a check to her aunt who had always rescued everyone and never asked for anything. She was afraid of those pictures. She was afraid of wanting them, and if I say no, she asked. Then you go back to your life, Victoria said, speaking for the first time in many minutes. And we try something else. We will reinstate you with an apology. A real one, not the kind that says we're sorry you felt harmed. Caldwell made a listless note on his pad. The way you write, remember milk when your house is on fire. Leela put her hand on the folder. The paper was warm from the table, or from the room, or from the heat her body made just standing there with the future close by. Why me? She asked, not looking up. Because you stayed, Jonah said. Because you didn't ask for anything. Because someone we needed saw you do something no one else thought was valuable and thought, this is the shape. Also, his mouth tilted, because I need help, and you don't seem like the kind of person who confuses help with worship. Mr. Pierce, Victoria said, turning, please step outside. Caldwell stood so stiffly his chair made a sound like a bitten apple. He left, the kind of leaving that says I am not done, not by 10 miles. Victoria focused on Lila again. We are not good at asking for help in this family, she said, as if confession were a thing she allowed herself once a quarter. We prefer to fix, to dominate, to pretend the house was never on fire. My son is attempting something I do not understand and therefore suspect. But I am not so old I cannot learn. She inclined her head. An inch, an earthquake. What do you say? Lila thought of the shape of her life. Not the facts, but the feeling. The way days stacked like plates. The way she found joy in the pattern on the china even when the plate was cracked. The way she had learned to make the small count when the big didn't show. She thought of the night. A man fell through the revolving door like he had fallen through a hole in his life, and how she had stepped forward without thinking because maybe that's what we are for, to catch each other when gravity forgets us. She looked at Jonah. He didn't look away. She looked at Victoria. The older woman met her gaze and did not blink. I say, Lila said, and her voice was steady enough to build on, let's try. Jonah exhaled. It was like watching someone set down a heavy thing they'd been carrying for so long they'd forgotten it wasn't part of their body. Good, he said. We start Monday. Monday, Lila said. It came out a little breathless. She hadn't meant it to be a question. Monday, Victoria confirmed. Wear whatever makes you feel like a blade. Lila did not laugh. But something in her, something tired and good, stirred and stood up. Outside the conference room, the hallway seemed brighter, as if someone had dusted the light. Caldwell was leaning against the far wall, phone to his ear, voice low and smooth. He hung up when he saw her. Congratulations, he said. His mouth smiled. His eyes didn't. This is a difficult business. People will say they love revolution right up until it threatens their dividends. I don't love revolution, Lila said calmly. I love rooms where people can breathe. He tilted his head like he was listening to opera and trying to decide whether or not to clap. We'll see. She rode the elevator down with the folder pressed to her chest like a book she hadn't decided to write yet. In the lobby, the plaque waited. She stopped. She ran her finger under the words like a child learning to read. Our guests are our purpose. Our staff are our foundation. Not yet, she murmured to no one, to herself. But maybe. On Monday, she walked into the Crest Meridian at 6 a.m. in a black blazer she had bought at a thrift store that gave discounts to teachers and nurses because the owner liked the idea of both. She wore flat shoes and the kind of expression that didn't invite questions. She had slept maybe 4 hours, eaten toast like an assignment, told Chef Miriam on the phone at 9 the night before, don't laugh and listen to the older, Woman, laugh anyway, and then cry. The back office near the kitchen. A room with a coffee machine. That was older than several line cooks. Miriam slid a notebook across the desk. It had grease stains like constellations. My notes, she said. On everything that actually runs this place. Not the glossy version. The real, Lila swallowed. Thank you. Don't thank me, Miriam said briskly. I'm selfish. I want to work in a hotel that doesn't make me feel like I'm murdering parts of myself to keep the chandeliers shining. Lila opened the notebook. The first page was labeled, Stuff the board doesn't know we do to keep this place human. The first bullet point was staff meals at 4:30, whether there's a banquet or not. The second was keep a drawer of socks in housekeeping for people who forgot theirs and are bleeding in their shoes. The third was, when a guest is cruel, write it down. We forget, and then we gaslight ourselves. She breathed out slow. Jonah arrived at 8 with an assistant named Renee who had a face that looked like it had learned sincerity in a good home. They sat in the office with Miriam and the head of housekeeping, a tiny man named Omar who could make beds into altars. We're going to break some habits, Jonah said. The first is pretending people are interchangeable. The second is believing the internet is a weather system we can't predict. The third is assuming the only way to be safe is to be small. He looked at Lila as if to ask, Am I saying this right? You are, she said, and wondered when she had begun to trust her own mouth. At 10, Caldwell circulated an email with a subject line that had the falsely friendly cheer of a bomb disguised as a cake. Welcome, new GM. The body included a paragraph about stewardship that made Lila feel like she'd been cast in a play about a woman who fails with grace. She replied with 3 sentences thanking him for the warm welcome and confirming the first agenda item she wished to discuss. A full audit of the security department's protocols and records, with special attention to badge swipes and camera updates. She CC'd Victoria. She hit send and felt like she had lit a small, controlled fire in a room that needed warming. At noon, she walked the lobby with Omar. He showed her the places where the cleaning had to be done twice because rich people confuse mess with evidence of their existence. He showed her the side door where staff slipped out to cry because the bathroom mirrors were mean. He showed her the drawer of socks. Where did you get all these? Lila asked, holding up a pair with tiny strawberries. Donations, Omar said. And ShopMart. They have a sale every month. I buy 3 packs. I'll reimburse, she began. He shook his head, scandalized. It's an honor, he said with such solemnity she had to look away. At 3, a woman from legal named Priya who had eyes like an exam you could pass if you did your homework sat across from Lila in the office and explained the trust again, slowly, while Jonah listened with the intent focus of a man learning a language he had once mocked. Priya's last sentence was, They will try to discredit you. She said it the way you say there will be rain in April. They already tried, Lila said. I have good shoes. At 5, she stood in the doorway of the ballroom and watched a row of housekeepers in navy uniforms set water goblets with the grace of surgeons. She wanted to cry for no reason she could have explained, and for every reason you can list if you've ever worked while exhausted and found yourself part of a pattern that was bigger than your tiredness. At 7, Chef Miriam served the staff meal, rice and lamb and a salad that tasted like a decision to live. Jonah stood at the end of the line with a tray like everyone. Someone whispered too loud, Is it true? And someone else whispered, Shh. And someone else said, not a whisper, It's true. Lila ate with them and felt like her body was a house with the lights on for once. At 9, when the lobby emptied and the piano player in the bar slid into a song that made the air taste like bourbon, Caldwell came and stood a precise 3 feet from her and smiled like a knife hidden in a handshake. Ms. Perez, he said. A word, of course, she said. She did not move to the office. She did not step out of the lobby. She stood where the whole hotel could see her, or at least the part of it that wished to look. I admire your enthusiasm, Caldwell said. I worry you are overestimating your authority. I am aware of the exact dimensions of my authority, Lila said. I am currently using all of it. He tilted his head. We have obligations to lenders that do not care for experiments. "We are not an experiment," she said. "We are a hotel." He leaned in a fraction. "We are a business. A week from now, there is a bond covenant review. If certain ratios are not met, a technical default triggers. The board will panic. Your charming trust will look like a pet project. They will eat you alive and ask for seconds." He smiled. It landed on her like a cold hand. "Thank you for the warning," she said. He was already turning away when he said, over his shoulder, as if reminding her of something she'd left on a bus, "Also, watch your staff. People love a new boss until she touches their hours." She let him go, then stood very still until her heartbeat climbed down the ladder it had just ascended. She took out her phone and typed a message to Priya. "Bond covenants. How close are we? What does technical default mean here?" The reply came back. "Close, but not fate. Meet me and Jonah at 8 a.m. Let's pull the numbers." At midnight, she walked through the penthouse because she had permission now, because she needed to remind herself that rooms this high are still part of the same building. The glass turned the city into a million little fires. She remembered Jonah asleep, the towel, the peach pit. She stood at the piano and pressed one key. It rang out thinly and then warmed, as if the room were deciding whether to let the sound live. Behind her, quiet footsteps. She did not jump. She knew the sound of his walk now. Careful, then looser. "Hi," Jonah said, leaning in the doorway as if it were a friend. He looked tired, but not like a man about to fall through the floor of his life. He looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy thing and had started to believe he wasn't the only one holding it. "Hi," she said. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For using the MasterCard," she laughed, surprised. "I'll put it in my memoir," she said. "How I broke into a life I didn't plan to live." He smiled, then sobered. "Caldwell is not going to play fair," he said. "He thinks fairness is a fairy tale for people who shop at regular stores." "I don't expect fair," she said. "I expect work," he nodded. "There's something else," he said, and the way he said it made the room go quiet in a different way. "What?" He walked to the piano and touched the same key she had, as if to tell it a secret. "I'm not drinking," he said. "I stopped on Tuesday. I am saying it out loud to make it harder to unsay." She felt something in her soften. Not pity. Relief flavored with respect. "Do you want accountability?" she asked. "Or just to be heard?" "Both," he said. "And for you to know that, if I fail. It won't be because you didn't help. You won't fail," she said, and thought, he might. "People do, but not tonight." He nodded. "Good night, Lila." "Good night, Jonah." He left her there with the city and the key in the shape of the next day. In the morning, numbers. Priya spread spreadsheets across the conference table like sheets on a bed. Jonah rolled up his sleeves the way men do in commercials when they are about to pretend they understand the pain of the working class. Except this time there was no camera and he actually looked like he was there for the work. "We're tight," Priya said. "Occupancy is solid, but our revenue per available room dipped last quarter. The banquet business rescued us. If we take a short hit to comp rooms or staff meals, we won't," Lila said. It came out before she could process the implications. Priya looked at her, not annoyed, just adjusting her math. "Then we need to increase bar revenue or sell out the weekends," she said. "We can do both if we—" "Tell the truth," Lila said. Jonah raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About what we are," she said. Words arrived that felt like they had been walking toward her for a long time and were glad to arrive. "We are a hotel that takes care of people. Not just rich people. All people. We treat staff like the foundation, not the carpet. We feed everyone like we believe in their work. We make a lobby where nobody has to pretend to be less tired than they are." "That doesn't sell rooms," Priya said, not unkindly. "It might," Lila said, "if no one else is brave enough to say it." Jonah's mouth did that half-smile that looked like a door not quite open. "Pitch me," he said. And she did, not from a deck, not with a reel, but from the pen she found in the drawer and a whiteboard that smelled like squeak. She mapped a weekend called The City Breathes. Live music by Stafford's Cousins, a pop-up bakery by the night porter's aunt who made guava pastries no one could forget, a bar menu that told the origin story of every cocktail and gave $1 from each to the staff emergency fund, room packages that included a handwritten list of real places to go if you wanted to feel like a person and not a wallet. It looked naive and true. It looked like a risk. "Do it," Jonah said. Priya sighed, then smiled. "If we pull it off, the bond ratios smile. If we don't, we pray." "Make the numbers," Lila said. "I'll make the room." By Friday, the lobby looked different. Not like a new hotel, but like itself after a good conversation. Plants from someone's uncle's nursery took up corners where nothing had grown but anxiety. The piano player was a high school music teacher who played with his eyes closed and his heart too open. The bar gleamed. The kitchen smelled like Miriam's childhood. A line formed at the side door. Cousins and neighbors and people who had once felt the hotel's cold from the sidewalk and now wanted to see if warmth was real. At 6, the first guests arrived in dresses that wanted to dance and shirts that remembered how to fit. At 7, the bar wrote its first check to the emergency fund. At 8, Lila stood at the threshold between the lobby and the bar and watched the air thicken with laughter that wasn't purchased so much as invited. At 9, Caldwell stood at the mezzanine with his phone. He took a picture, then another. He did not look pleased. Lila watched him the way you watch a weather report, interested but unwilling to surrender your day to it. At 10, a woman tripped on the step down into the bar. Lila moved without thinking. She caught her elbow. "Careful," she said. The woman laughed and said, "Story of my life," and Lila said, "Mine too," and felt, as surely as the glass in the chandeliers needed dusting, that something was happening that would matter later. At 11, Jonah walked into the lobby with his hands in his pockets like a boy about to ask for a dance and not sure he'll get one. He looked better in motion, as if stillness reminded his body of old habits it was trying to forget. He nodded to Lila from across the room. She nodded back. Priya stepped out of the office, held up a sheet of paper, and mouthed, "Ratios," with a thumbs up. Lila laughed out loud. Someone near her laughed too, because laughter is a contagion more blessed than any we fear. At midnight, the ledger line tipped from red to black as if it had simply needed permission. They did not know it then, but across the city, 3 lenders slept badly. One blogger rewrote her angle, and Caldwell sent an email to a private address with an attachment labeled Strategic Options. At 2 in the morning, Lila sat on a stool in the kitchen with her shoes off, eating a bowl of rice that tasted like childhood and victory. Miriam turned the radio up. Omar fell asleep, standing, his head against the wall, and woke himself with a snore that made everyone giggle. "You made a room," Miriam said. "The hotel will follow." Lila didn't cry. She put her head down on her arms for 30 seconds and let the night rearrange itself inside her. And in the morning, they began again, because that is what you do when you're building a safety that's not a promise but a practice. You begin again, and again, and again, until beginning feels like a kind of home.